WNST spring that we had that sprung up over the weekend, as well as Light City here in Baltimore. But the visitors are here. They're the ones in the blue, the nice folks with those Canadian passports and maybe a little hockey on their brain as well. I bring this guy in, not as a Blue Jays analyst or baseball insider or hockey aficionado. He is all of those because he is Canadian, but he's also the NFL national writer at Bleacher Report, and he's one of our fun guests to have on. We tell you to go follow him out on Twitter as well at Brad_Gagnon. That's Gagnon. And we welcome him back on to the program here. And, dude, you and I have a pretty good time through all this, right? Because it's never too long before something happens with hockey or the Caps or something happens with the Blue Jays and the Orioles. And we all know they play football 365 days a year in this country. I know that much.
Yeah, and this is really the sweet spot of the year. I mean, it's obviously it's not as football centric as it is in September through February when they're actually playing the games. But I mean, when you have this sort of lull, not even a lull, it's kind of the time to have conjecture, if you will, between the free agency, the heart of free agency, and the draft. And right now we're looking ahead to that and looking back at the heart of free agency, and we just had the owners meetings, and so there's so much going on there.
Only two teams have moved since the last time we talked. Only two franchises.
Yeah, only two.
Since the last time we talked 8 weeks ago, it's been two franchises have moved. I'm not making that up.
Yeah.
I mean, not that there's anything going on in the league at all, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, between that and then obviously having hockey and basketball hitting their playoffs and baseball getting underway, it really is it's a real fun time for sports, and especially in maybe our two centers where obviously Toronto sports is doing pretty nicely compared to in the past, and obviously right now the Orioles are still a good team, and Washington and the Capitals are obviously probably the number one team in the Eastern Conference headed into the playoffs.
Don't forget the Wizards, because they're coming to Toronto to beat the Raptors. Watch, right?
Those two are neck and neck, and they've been battling it back and forth, and it's one of those weird times for those two because they're not too sure who wants to be the 3 seed. It depends on what happens with Boston and Cleveland as well. The key is you don't want to play the Cavs until the Eastern Conference Final. You don't want to look too far ahead, but you don't want to avoid that clear-cut bracket connection with Cleveland. So it's kind of a weird little jockey where it might be careful what you wish for type situation.
Yeah, you never know what to make of it, right? I mean, if the Wizards beat the snot out of the Cavaliers, you start to think good things. If the Warriors beat the Wizards, you think it through, but it doesn't matter. It matters how they're playing in 6 weeks, like my hockey team as an example. But look, it's baseball. Everyone wants positivity around baseball around here. Everyone wants to believe this is the year they're going to win 97 games and, sort of shock the world. Look, for your city, for my city, the last 5 years, it's been pretty good. I mean, literally. I mean, both of these teams have been involved in a way that they hadn't been involved for a long, long time, given the Yankees and the Red Sox dominance. Saw the Yankees get their noses bloodied to start the season on Sunday. That was kind of cool as well. But I know you got a lot of Jays mojo. Before I get to some football here, it is opening week here. Some thoughts about the Blue Jays and expectations, because I think, and I'm going to say this all week, and it pisses people off here locally, I think the Orioles really had a lousy offseason. I mean, I'm not looking at the Orioles and saying, wow, like, look at the offseason they had. I mean, they're going to win 95 or 100 games. It's more like, really? And for the Blue Jays, I think they've had underwhelming off seasons every off season because they're crazy on the trading deadline and they've been involved.
Yeah.
But losing Wells last year, I think strike that. Price last year. How did I confuse Wells and Price? I'm going back to 1992. And picking up J.A. Happ last year. Nobody really thought J. Happ was going to be what he was. This offseason, it's Encarnacion, and I find it hard to believe that Bautista's still in a Blue Jays jersey. I think it speaks volumes to what the market thought of him.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's this mood in Toronto that, a lot of folks obviously wanted Edwin Encarnacion back, and folks were a little less excited about Bautista because, of course, it's based on what you've done for me lately. And Jose Bautista's a little older, a little more injury prone at this point in his career, and obviously didn't have the season that Edwin Encarnacion did in 2016. But, you look at the overall body of work, you look at the fact that aside from that, 2016 season, Bautista's actually been very healthy for much of his career. He obviously, you see the way he flexes before every single swing. I mean, the guy's in great shape physically still. So there's
it's all that bat flipping he does, right? right, Brad?
Exactly. It's the bat flip. You need to be in great shape to bat flip, right? So, people have, over the course of the offseason, I think folks in Toronto have come around a fair bit on the idea of having Bautista back. There's a little more upside there that he's, the law of averages says he'll bounce back. And then also, of course, it's not as though there's no replacement for Encarnacion. Kendrys Morales is, a very, very strong power hitter who comes from a tough ballpark in Kansas City to a place like Toronto where you can kind of golf him out of there. So we'll see if he can maybe make a run at 30, 40 home runs, and that sort of, takes up a lot of the production that you lose with Encarnacion. Steve Pearce can sort of contribute to that as well. So it's not as though all is lost. I think, it was probably an off season where a lot of folks think, are they better on paper than they were in October? Probably not. Are they significantly worse if they stay healthy and everything goes right with Josh Donaldson and Bautista and Devin Travis? Then they could be better. And the rotation is still one of the best in baseball. You have Lariano from the very start this time around, and really 5 solid starters, not having to worry about R.A. Dickey and his caddy catcher. It's sort of there's a little bit of feelings of optimism right now regarding what they can do, but of course it's going to be tough with Boston. And you're right, Baltimore didn't have the best off season either, but it's so often that we think that teams are going to take a step backward based on what happens in the off season. And actually with the Orioles specifically, we've seen this before. And then that doesn't happen. I mean, the Orioles weren't supposed to, and a lot of folks' mind do, even what they did last year. And then they ended up, exceeding expectations. So, I wouldn't rule them out. I think it's going to be a very interesting battle in that division, basically between everybody. Not a great start for the Yankees, but they're so young and talented that you got to think they're going to stick around as well. So.
Well, Brad Gagnon joining us here from Bleacher Report up in Toronto. He is a Jays fan, not a Leafs man, a Canadians fan. I'll get to the hockey portion of this segment later on. But before I leave baseball, you said something that really struck me, because this will be something we'll talk about with football too, Brad. Are they better than they were when the season ended last year? And we all know how the Orioles season ended last year, right? I mean, obviously, right there on the carpet up in your homeland. And I don't think that's been washed out of the brains of the people here in Baltimore or even out of the guys on the team, but no Tillman to start the season. They did not augment the pitching. I look at it and I say, yeah, they were fortunate to do what they did last year. The bullpen was better than we thought it would be. They hit more home runs than anybody thought they could hit. That I don't think they can hit that many home runs this year. I don't think they can stay as healthy as they did last year, and they already have it because Tillman's not pitching this week or next week or the next week. So, filling in when you lose your number one starter, even if it's not Koufax or in this case Price or Mad Bum and what we saw him do on Sunday as well, it's bad enough when you lose that kind of guy, or Dodgers lose a Kershaw. But when you're the Orioles and your pitching's not very good to begin with, and it's a little suspect and a little questionable, where you're penciling Gausman in for 16 or 17 wins and he's never seen 10. When you're penciling Dylan Bundy in to throw 215 innings when he hasn't done it, and then the bottom of the rotation with the Wade Mileys and the Jimenezes. That, I mean, if you gave me $1 right now on either one of them and said, well, one of them will be out of the rotation by Memorial Day, the other will be out of the rotation by the 4th of July. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I mean, those are guys with 5.5 ERAs, and Buck doesn't like that. So for me, if you're not a better team today than you were last October, and you've already said you don't really believe the Blue Jays are, I don't really believe the Orioles are, then what the hell were you doing the whole offseason, right? I mean, if you didn't get better in the last 6 months, what did you do?
It's true, but of course you got to consider again. I mean, the idea of, and I'm trying to be an optimist here, which is rare for me, but at least for the folks in Baltimore, I am
be the nice Canadian guy, man.
Yeah, and so, so this is the thing for me is that you can get worse on paper and get better in the standings. It can happen, and when you have players who are can transform the game, players who can take over games or for weeks sometimes, like a Manny Machado, like a Chris Davis. When you have Mark Trumbo, when you have Adam Jones, you mentioned that, of course, the rotation isn't extremely deep. It has a lot of question marks. both at the top end in terms of that injury question, and then the bottom end in terms of that sustainability question, and having, you know, a guy go 250 innings after never having done that in his career. I mean, the Jays sort of faced that to a degree with Aaron Sanchez as well. But I mean, those are all question marks. But when you have that raw talent on a roster, you know, whether it's developed or undeveloped, and in Baltimore's case, it's extremely developed with their power hitters, especially in that infield and Trumbo and Jones. You have the ability, if you can stay healthy, to do some big things. And again, the one other advantage is, you know, the disadvantage is that Boston probably got a heck of a lot better on paper, where Baltimore, Toronto probably got worse on paper. The advantage is that's on paper. And again, this is a different ball game when now the Red Sox have everything to lose. You know, this last year, you know, it was a season where the Red Sox really were under almost no pressure because they weren't supposed to be good yet. And this kind of mini rebuild they're undertaking. And you know, they were kind of still considered to be maybe a year or two away. So were the Yankees. Now, all of a sudden, Boston's probably the favorite in that division. So does that change things with a young baseball team like the Red Sox or a young team like the Yankees, who are now all of a sudden have a lot of pressure on them there in New York? So, you know, I think the dynamics of the regular season are going to surprise us in terms of looking on paper and, again, seeing the sort of, okay, these two teams got worse, these other two teams got better, and then there's the Rays. And so is that just how it's going to kind of pan out? No, it might be completely different because Baltimore and Toronto have more experienced talent in their lineups than Boston and New York do at this point in time. And let's not forget, the Red Sox still did lose their best power hitter to retirement.
Yeah, replacing that would have been like a Trumbo out of our lineup or a Encarnacion out of your lineup. You got to go scramble. And, you know, the Red Sox had already spent so much internally with the Ramirez and Panda and the other guys that they had there. The Orioles are, you know, bouncing around Pedro Alvarez again. So at least they didn't bring Nolan Reimold back. And I think we can both be thankful for that. We've both shared Nolan Reimold over the years. Also Roberto Alomar and some other decent players, but Jimmy Key amongst others. But I don't think that'll go down in the annals of his shared playerdom, Nolan Reimold experiment on both ends of the border.
Will Steve Pearce become the next great shared Oriole?
You know, I'm shocked that he's not an Oriole because I perceive that Buck always loved him. You know what I mean? Like, he had some awesome at-bats. He was that, you know, unsung hero kind of Oriole guy for a couple of seasons here. They brought him back once. They brought him back twice. You know, he just feels like that B.J. Surhoff kind of like guy, sort of like a wet boogie. You're never going to get rid of him. He's just going to be coming back every year because the manager likes him. And, you know, around here it's Ryan Flaherty is always accused of being that guy. Brad Gagnon joining us here. Even though we've talked a lot of baseball, we've snuck in a little NBA and a little bit of hockey, and I'll get to my Caps at the end of all this because I can't have a Canadian dude on and not end with. You either have to end with hockey or Geddy Lee, and if you can do them both, then you got something, Brad. So listen,
then you really killed it as a radio host. Then if you can combine those two, baseball is easier than hockey there. So if you can do that, then I will be very impressed.
Well, you are very, very fluent, which is why I love having you on the program, man. You speak all the languages here. But football's your thing, and you know, obviously the owners' meetings last week, you know, some issues there with some rules changes and some feelings hurt and, you know, whatnot. The big story. The league's moved 2 franchises in the last 8 weeks, and you sit north of the border where John Bon Jovi was trying to pirate off the Bills to you guys a period of time. By the way, the Pagulas say hello to everybody north of the border and invite you down anytime you want to come. But I got to be honest, man. My head's on a swivel about this. I'm in a city that lost a team, that stole a team. I cover this. I'm not, you know, a newbie to the business side. I've sat in all these stadia many, many times, traveling back and forth, and I have an incredible affinity for San Diego as a town, as a franchise, as a building with the Murph, and my childhood spending time there. Obviously, Oakland. You and I've talked about my baseball trip a couple years ago, and I love that old dump out there in Oakland, but. The time had sort of come, right? I mean, even where you are, where we're celebrating 25 years now for Camden Yards, your old dome up there that I remember as a shining jewel is a bit of a dump, right? I mean, if the NFL went to Toronto, they want something better than what you have there, quite frankly, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and those are the business realities of sports. And I think that, as you said there, and most of us understand that. It doesn't make it, any easier as a fan base to swallow something like this developing. But, what this really is as well is really it's the owners of the sports world. It's literally the owners of the sports world kind of reaping what they began to sow a long time ago, where, as soon as there were governments, what municipal governments or city councils or obviously state level governments that were willing to bend over backwards to avoid losing their sports teams, those dominoes had started to fall, and those precedents had been set, and every other owner said, I want $700 million in taxpayer money to build my stadium. I don't care if I'm worth $3.6 billion. I want $1 billion from the taxpayers because so did that guy, And so aside from the rare exceptions, the Giants and Jets built a stadium privately, and obviously Stan Kroenke's building one in LA privately to share with the Chargers for the Rams. But aside from that, almost everyone's borrowing big bucks now, and the state of California is a state that has recently gone through a bankruptcy that is, for all intents and purposes, right, a broke state that is a liberal politically state that is not necessarily willing on a local level to fork over even more money for stadiums. I mean, right now there's folks in Oakland that have been on their property tax bill for the last 25 years, have been footing the bill for the renovations made to that stadium that is very lovable, as you say, but is no longer as a NFL level venue.
Dude, I'm the only one that loves it. Nobody else. I love it because it reminds me of Memorial Stadium. There are no more Baltimore Memorial Stadiums.
More people love it than you give it credit. I think it is easy to love these old pieces of garbage in a weird way. This is the best way for me to put it.
Right. I mean, you pine away for Maple Leaf Gardens. I pine away for the Capitol Center, which was always new in my childhood. It's been gone it feels like half of my life already. I mean, it's been gone for 20 years. Yeah,
so I get it. So there's this love we have for these venues. We understand. I think we are, as fans, we get it that they want to build new venues, especially in this case. I mean, it's ridiculous how we see in Atlanta they're building a new venue every 20 years for all their sports teams, and they're using some taxpayer money to do that. That's
By the way, did you see those beer holders in the outfield in Atlanta?
No, I haven't seen them.
I watched the game. So this is what happens when you spend the whole weekend sick as a dog. You wind up watching like Braves, Yankees, preseason baseball from new stadiums just to see what's going on in the new stadium.
Now, right?
Yeah, they played in the new stadium the other night. And it was Saturday night, Friday night. I get them all confused. I had a fever for 4 days. So, but I did remember this. Out in right field now in that new ballpark in Atlanta, SunTrust, all of the cup holders out in the Coors Light Pavilion have freezers in the tabletops.
Oh, come on.
So you can stick your beer in the hole and it stays frozen. Top that. Canada didn't come up with that. That's America, Brad Gagnon, Atlanta, GA. Well, not really Atlanta.
In Canada, we provide that free of charge with the elements. But I think that, that is really proof positive. That's an example of what is happening in the sports world with venues. They need venues with freezers in cup holders now. And again, if we go back to, what happened in Oakland and San Diego this offseason, I mean, again, that's what it comes down to. They're just no longer willing, in that state especially, to fund these things, especially for owners that, the Spanos family, the Davis family, they're saying, you got to be putting this bill. And they made big efforts in those cities, not big enough apparently, but, I don't blame those councilors, I don't blame those mayors, I don't blame those state representatives. It happens. It's the nature of the game now, unfortunately. And I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon unless, maybe more and more local governments kind of stick up for the taxpayer and say, we're not doing this. You're worth billions. You pay for your drive it off the lot and immediate loss of value venue. And that's just the reality nowadays. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes, because right now it's really, there's an intangible aspect of this that we can't measure right now, which is how much is this actually affecting the NFL financially, business-wise, in terms of a loss of fan loyalty, in terms of fans being turned off by these moves. That's stuff that's really kind of immeasurable at this point in time, especially in 2017 terms. And until we get a feel for that, we won't know if this is going to be incentivizing for the NFL to keep doing and keep pushing teams to do this. Say, we're going to give you a Super Bowl if you get a new stadium and a Pro Bowl or whatever else. Or if they're going to say, we've taken a huge hit, let's cool it on this. Let's realize that these venues, outside of maybe the real decrepit ones, are ones that can be renovated, like we saw in Miami, for instance. instance this past year and roll with it. So it's kind of a important breaking point based on what we've seen with 3 teams moving in the last 15 months and what's going to happen going forward with all this.
He is Brad Gagnon. He covers all things NFL up in the beautiful Toronto, Canada region. Beautiful this time of year. It's still winter there, but spring will come at some point. Well, they send the Blue Jays down here to begin the season. He's also a Jays fan. And before I let you go, football side, any winner you're seeing in the – we just talked earlier about the Blue Jays and the Orioles not being better as they're assembled on opening day 2017 than they were in 16. From a football perspective – I like what the Ravens have done, and I'm trying to look at all of these teams and say, is there a big winner out there? I mean, clearly the Patriots were already the big winner. So far, they are the team that has markedly improved to my eyes. Now, we got to draft it, that everybody is looking to get better through the draft. Certainly the Cowboys did last year, and a number of other teams really helped. Titans last year helped themselves a lot in the draft, but it is interesting this time of year to look at it because we're sort of at the halfway pole, right? Like the free agency part, that's done. Now, what are you going to do through the draft? And I know some quarterbacks are, that market's playing itself out, but I like the Patriots, but I'm not in love with anybody else and saying, wow, that team certainly got better.
Yeah, it is really sad almost that we have to say the Patriots are probably that team that's made the biggest leap considering they already were. It's the definition of the rich getting richer. It's incredible what's happened there. But, the other teams that come to mind is you got to look at this, what was a team maligned for the most last season? What was that obvious sticking point? And you think, okay, if Seattle upgrades their offensive line this offseason, we can say that they finally got better. They didn't do that. If the Broncos or the Colts they upgrade their offensive lines, we can say they finally got, neither of those teams did that. So you can cross them off the list, but then you look for those teams that actually did take those clear-cut weak spots and made some clear-cut moves to get better. And the first team that comes to mind when you look at that is the Philadelphia Eagles. Just with 2 receivers, with Alshon Jeffrey, who was there for a short 1-year contract, and Torrey Smith, who was good a couple of years ago, and they got for practically nothing. You had 2 veteran receivers with 1,000-yard seasons under their belt to your receiving core for your young quarterback. I always like a move like that. And it's, sticking in that Baltimore Ravens division, I think it's hard to say the Cleveland Browns didn't get a lot better. I mean, they're coming from nothing. They with only 1 win last year, but when you add 2 new offensive linemen and Zietler and Shredder to be your interior guys to support Joe Thomas outside, and you add a guy like Kenny Britt, who's got a lot of experience coming off a breakout season, you add a second-round pick basically free of charge when you weren't going to spend to the cap, and Brock Osweiler comes in to compete at quarterback. It's hard to think they didn't get at least a fair bit better as well. That might only mean going from 1 win to 4, but it's still a lot of progress for a team that's kind of finally putting the proper pieces in place and now just needs that quarterback.
Brad, any predictions for the Capitals? Are they going to win the Stanley Cup or are they not? I mean, you're a Canadian guy. It would give me confidence. And I know you're not like a Maple Leaf guy. You're a Montreal Canadian guy. So you have a totally different take for a guy being in Toronto, right?
Yeah, it's I think if I had to, put all my life savings on one team right now, I would be going with the Chicago Blackhawks or the Washington Capitals. And those are the 2 teams in both conferences that are the obvious answers probably right now. I just don't know if I can see Columbus going on the deep run that a lot of people think they can. I know that obviously we know that they can get extremely hot. But I do think it's someone in that division. I think that division is head and shoulders above. And being a Habs fan is really unfortunate because there's a very good chance Montreal is going to have to play the New York Rangers in the first round as the wild card team. And the Rangers are probably a better team than anyone in that division. Anyone, whether it be Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, or Boston. So that's going to be a tough one for the Habs. I do think someone comes out of that division. I think Ottawa and Toronto and Montreal are going to all beat the heck out of each other and try to win their rivalry series. Boston as well as part of that potentially. And then they're going to come out of that, and one of them's going to have to face Washington or Columbus or the Rangers or Pittsburgh on the other end. But again, I think that's what makes it a bit of a toss-up there. That's why I think I'd probably go Chicago first because Chicago's got kind of that head and shoulders advantage that everyone in their conference, whereas Washington's got to deal with Columbus and Pittsburgh and Montreal and New York, and that's going to be tough. It's going to be a toss-up. But they are the best team in that conference. I do feel pretty certain of that.
At some point, you're going to have to beat a couple of good teams to get through this tournament. I don't think there's any, which is what makes it so great, by the way. Hey, man, always great catching up with you. And for me, I am hoping the Capitals play the Maple Leafs in the first round because the Orioles are actually in Toronto at that time. So I would get baseball and hockey sort of intersecting if the stars align. And more than that, I would probably have a few craft brews beers with you, my friend. So,
We'll finally be able to have those beers. Exactly.
Keep it cool up there. We'll see you in 2 weeks, and we'll see what's going on, and we'll continue to check in with you. Always love having you on, and I know you have your mock draft up too, so I want to promote that for everybody. Brad Gagnon doing a mock draft. When's that out this week? A little later on.
It'll be out Tuesday morning. So I'll tweet it out there, but also it should be kind of featured on our Bleacher Report's splash page on the homepage there.
Brad, keep the faith, man. We'll get you back on again soon. Thanks for coming on.
You too, man. Thank you.
You got it. Brad Gagnon doing it at Bleacher Report, north of the border up in Toronto with the Blue Jays in town. I thought, let's go talk to Brad a little bit, get a little football, get a little hockey, get a little flavor in here. If you miss anything this week, you can find it in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Happy opening day, opening week to everybody out there celebrating. I got hockey, basketball, Ravens off season. We got a ton of stuff. The Liars Luncheon is this week. Stick around for us if you want to sign up for our morning newspaper. That would get you everything you need first. It's the WNST morning newspaper. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. You can sign up online at WNST.net. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST text service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home with the SSV on WNST. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. We still have space on our London trip. The NFL schedule's coming out in the next 2 weeks. We're going to have discounts for all people that have been on previous WNST trips. Stay tuned to the website and all of our social to find that. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.